You are listening to Proof of Love with Tatiana Moroz, Dr. Stephanie Murphy, and Lauren Kasovitz. This show may contain adult content, language, and humor and is intended for mature audiences. If that's not you, please stop listening. Nothing you hear on Proof of Love is intended as financial advice, legal advice, therapy, or really anything other than entertainment. Please take everything that you hear with a grain of salt. Oh, and if you're hearing us on an affiliate network, the ideas and views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of the network that you're listening on, or of any of the sponsors or affiliate products that you may hear about on the show. Now that that's squared away, let's start the show. Show me your heart. I know that it's beating. Tell me that you love me too. So I know your heart is true. 'Cause I need some proof of love. 'Cause I need some proof of love. 'Cause I need some proof of love. Will you be in New York for Blockchain Week? If so, come by 235 Fifth Ave for a special community event that brings together some of the brightest stars in crypto. Saturday night, May 11th from 7 p.m. to 1 a.m. Join Tatiana Moroz, Michael Salvi, Naomi Brockwell, Bailey Rutzel, and so many more of your favorite crypto friends for a night of music, comedy, and live entertainment. It's free to attend, so register now. Go to cryptostaravents.com. And also, I want to say a special thank you to our sponsors, Chia.net, blocktap.io, Edge, Sonic Scoop, Bitcoin Magazine, Lennox Group, and of course, Crypto Media Hub. So make sure you go to cryptostaravents.com and get your tickets now. Thank you to our sponsor, blocktap.io. Please go to their website and check out their universal cryptocurrency API to get reliable cryptocurrency data. blocktap.io. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Proof of Love, the show that shows you what you're missing in your life and how to get there. My name's Tatiana Moroz. I'm your host today. I have two beautiful co-hosts with me. I'm very happy to be joined by Dr. Stephanie Murphy. Hey, Steph.
Hey. Super excited about this show.
Me too. And the beautiful Lauren Kasovitz. Hey, Lauren.
Hey, everyone. I can't wait for today. I'm so excited.
Me too. Awesome. So we are joined with Dr. Natalie Trent, who is a PhD, a research scientist that investigates the benefits of yoga, Reiki, and other spiritual practices, universal love. And basically, she's going to talk to us about basically the science of love. She completed her doctorate in neuroscience at Queen's University and her postdoctoral fellowships at Harvard University and Harvard Medical School. So the way that me and Natalie met was at a Narc Awakening down in Acapulco in February, and she was giving a talk there. We got along, and I thought, what a perfect guest for Proof of Love. So here we are a few months later, and we're very happy to have you. So welcome to the show, Natalie.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. I'm really happy to be here. I think it's a great topic and really looking forward to our discussion. So
awesome. So can you tell us a little bit about your background? You know, I could read your bio, but I'd love to hear it in your own words, you know, what you've been working on, because seems like you have some energy medicine background as well. So go for it.
Yeah, sure. So like you said, my PhD, I have a PhD in neuroscience, and I got that from Canada at Queen's University. And when I started my PhD, I was very interested in pharmacological aspects of fear regulation and anxiety. So I come from a family history of anxiety and depression. And so when you grow up in that kind of environment, a lot of people that do research, they do research in areas that are meaningful to them. So for me, it was anxiety. And by a pharmacological approach, I was looking at what drugs and what neurochemicals in the brain modulate our responses to fear. So if we perceive a threat in the environment, what is going on in the brain that translates that signal of threat or perceived threat into a behavior? So some kind of defensive behavior, you know, here we talk about like fight or flight, for instance. So I was really looking at the neurocircuitry of that. So I discovered these two particular brain regions that were involved in regulating our response to fear. And so this is how my PhD started. But early on, I think in the first year, I started a yoga practice and meditation. And that really shifted my personal experience of anxiety and fear and what we can really do to get at the core of it. So I felt like these more Eastern traditions were tackling sort of the root cause and addressing pathological behaviors and thoughts that perhaps traditional medicine and mental health care are not addressing. So we have a very biomedical model that we're still operating under. And this model says, if you have anxiety or depression, it's a neurochemical imbalance. So we should treat that neurochemically with drugs. So my whole perspective shifted based on a personal practice of yoga. And then I got involved in energy medicine and started to learn about the energetics of the body and emotions. And so really since then, I've shifted my research. So I finished my PhD and I started researching mindfulness and meditation and basically the benefits to psychological health of those practices. And then as well, Reiki. And this kind of led into studying love because from a personal practice perspective, I noticed through, I have my own Reiki practice, and I noticed the more that I could tap into feelings of love and compassion, not just for the individual I was working with, but in general, the stronger the healing was, the more of an effect that they felt and the more benefits that they got out of it. And I did research with psychedelics as well and near-death experiences, and I noticed the transformative power of these things is really rooted in this experience of divine love or universal love that's key to a lot of mystical experiences. And so I also noticed in the research, so in positive psychology field, for instance, that love was coming up as a really important mediator for psychological health. So from the scientific side and my own personal practice, they both sort of converged on the power and importance of love for healing and for well-being. And so since then, I've been studying what we're calling universal love, which is really love at its most purest form. This is unconditional love for basically all of existence, a pure form of just emanating love. So we think of love as projected onto many different people. We have romantic love and we have maternal love and brotherly love, and universal love is sort of the core of all of that. So that's what me and my research team are interested in. And so we developed a scale called the Universal Love Scale. And so this is a self-report measure where it's testing or looking at the embodiment of universal love. We can't directly measure universal love, but we can measure the different aspects of it. So for instance, when you're in a state of universal love, you wish well-being for everybody. You want to help others. You hope that they're happy. So these sorts of things are characteristic of the embodiment of universal love. So we developed a scale, and the purpose of that is that we can now scientifically study universal love. Without a measurement tool, you can't really detect changes or show to the scientific community that you're studying what you say you're studying. So that's been our first step, and we're moving forward with universal love meditation intervention work and looking at what's going on in the brain and the body and the immune system and gene expression during universal love. That was probably quite a mouthful, but
wow,
that's where I'm at right now. So,
Natalie, you're brave. I imagine you get a lot of pushback, both from the kind of like hard scientific community and also from the spiritual community about this, because like I'm imagining the criticism like this. Some people say, oh, why are you trying to quantify and study and do all this science on spiritual topics? Doesn't that kind of ruin the magic, right? And also, I imagine scientists saying, oh, what are you studying this unscientific hippie crap for? So what do you say to both of those criticisms?
Yeah, actually, I get a kick out of that now. And I think like in the beginning, maybe there was a little bit of anger from me at that. I have sort of a rebellious, obviously the type of work I do is rebellious side. So that can kind of fuel me a little bit. But I found lately, especially the last few years, that people are really ready for this. And I think a lot on the science side, the research is starting to accumulate. So when I started studying mindfulness, that was like a weird thing. It was like pseudoscience. What? How could you study that's so spiritual and woo-woo? It's like, well, that's a mental.
But now it's a trend.
It's exactly. So, so now there's tens of thousands of studies on mindfulness just in like 10 years. So it's really transforming. And I think like yoga's tailing behind that. We have some energy medicine. And I think the world is ready for this. And on the spiritual side, and to speak to the science again, a lot of the hardcore materialist scientists are kind of fading out. Like, I don't know, the whole generation is sort of, they're retiring or dying and a mix of all of that. And I'm surrounded by wonderful colleagues that really provide a sense of support. So the colleagues I work with on yoga research, Reiki research, I'm the president of the Center for Reiki Research. So we have a great group there, and we all understand these concepts. And so I kind of keep myself surrounded by supportive colleagues, and I cut off the narcissistic, closed-minded, materialist ones that try to they're just focused on their ego. And that's just not what I want to deal with anymore. So, and then on the spiritual side, I find a lot of support actually, because people that have been practicing these things, or they know the power of it, and they're just really happy that someone's taking the time to show the world the power of it in a scientific, quantifiable way. So I've actually been quite supported, and I don't know if the naysayers are just being quiet at this point, but I'd say early on when I was just thinking of this kind of work was when I got the most resistance. And once I started doing it, I think that resistance sort of fell away somehow. And I don't know, I just want to do the work that I'm supposed to do, like show me what to do kind of thing. So I'm hoping that I don't get too much pushback. But if I do, I'm okay dealing with it, because I'm not doing the work. Yeah, and it's not about me, so I don't take it personally.
Hey, Natalie, I have a question for you. I know about it, and I think probably quite a few people do, but it's still not completely mainstream. Could you explain to our audience what Reiki is exactly?
Yeah, sure. So Reiki loosely translates to universally guided life force energy. So it's a technique originating in Japan in the 1920s, late 1800s. But it's really based on just hands-on healing. So it's not really any particular tradition, although the Japanese systematized it and made it a particular practice. And it's basically laying on of the hands. So the idea is that we have life force energy. This is also known as chi, prana in yoga. And this is essentially our spirit, or what keeps us alive, animates our form, and allows us to experience life as a human in this reality. And so the theory is that in energy medicine, so Reiki is a form of energy medicine, is that any disruption or block in the flow of this life force energy results in disease of some kind. So it may start just emotionally. Maybe you're grumpy or like angry, you have a lot of anger. And so maybe there's a block in the liver, and eventually this could become liver disease, for instance. So the idea with the practice of Reiki is that the practitioner channels life force energy. So we're constantly bringing this energy into our body through our breath, through food, through sun, and some of it's going into the earth. And so we're bringing more in, and some of it is leaving. So as a practitioner, you can channel this energy. Everyone channels this energy and send it to whoever you're working with or yourself. So it tends to come out of the hands, the feet, the breath, and the eyes. So these are the points where the life force sort of leaks, as like kind of not the best term, but that's where the life force leaves the body. And so we put our hands on another, they'll start to absorb that life force, which is not ours. It's generic life force energy coming from source potentially. So, or in science, 0 point energy field. So yeah, and this can be done distance as well. So this goes into like the whole time-space illusion idea, but we're all connected, and I believe that we're connected through love. So universal love, I believe, is actually a mediating factor for the effectiveness of energy medicine, and that's something that I hope to test in the future as well.
But what is love then? I mean, if it's a universal force, how do you define what it is then?
Yeah, so we define it as a feeling or an experience of unity with others and with the whole of existence. So it's a way of describing that connection with another. So it's like the binding force of existence, the binding force of consciousness. So research shows actually that, we can affect each other's physiology at a distance. So, you put one person in a room and another person in another room, or even separate them by miles. And when one person focuses on the other, we can see changes in the physiology that mirror. So we might see similarity in heart rate, for instance. But what they found is that it's not the physical distance that matters, it's the emotional distance. So the closer you are in terms of how much you love the other person, the more you can pick up information about them and give them information in terms of changing their physiology measurably. And so this is related to a lot of experiences people have, like mothers, for instance, when they know something's wrong with their child and they wake up in the middle of the night, like in a panic, oh my God, something happening to my child. And it turns out, they were in a car accident, for example. These sorts of things are evidence for that connection that transcends space. And so I believe that love is that connection, that unity between different beings.
Wow. I love that. I think it's really interesting, especially in your practice specifically. Do you feel as though people are coming to you more to heal physical ailment, or is it a deeper kind of healing that they're looking for, that emotional healing, that connection to love that maybe they don't feel or they've lost?
Yeah, I feel it's mostly an emotional thing. And even if they do have physical symptoms, it always relates to emotion. So very much connected. So I get a lot of depression, a lot of people that, a common client is someone who feels that they should be living a certain way, or they feel maybe more spiritual, or they should be taking a different path, or their job's just not a fit for them anymore, and they just don't know what to do, and they don't know how to make that transition into a more authentic life, basically. And depression comes along with that a lot. And it's interesting because, to get back to some research with depression and love, actually, so they've done this study a few years ago where people mapped on their body where they felt certain emotions. So, eliciting anger, where do you feel that? And describing that they feel it in their fists and their cheeks. And the fist makes sense. Like, you want to punch something, right? You're really angry. It's like,
right,
you're aggressive. And if you're depressed, they actually don't feel energy anywhere in their body. They feel a lack of energy. So this kind of can relate to the life force idea. So when we're depressed, we're not taking in enough life force energy. We're not embodied. We don't want to live anymore. We don't care about anything anymore. And interestingly, with love and happiness, they felt the energy in their whole body. So there's some interesting connection there between embodiment and life force energy, and love being this like unification of within your own body too. So where all the life force is flowing properly and there's communication between systems, and it's ultimately a much healthier state. So that's what they find in psychology research too, is that the more love you have in your life, the healthier you are.
What do you think about like drugs like MDMA? How does that play in? Can you manufacture love chemically?
That's a good question. I think you can tap into it for sure. And there are certain neurochemicals like oxytocin, for instance, too, that are highly associated with feelings of love. So yeah, I mean, you can absolutely cultivate and generate it through things like MDMA. Eventually that feeling wears off with the drug, but it does increase empathy, which can be really, really valuable for healing purposes. So trying to see things from maybe the perspective of someone who did you harm can be tremendously healing, allow you to see things from different perspectives and have more compassion for those that previously you didn't have compassion for. So yeah, I think there's definitely a neurochemical relationship between the experience of love and what's going on in the brain. Oxytocin, vasopressin, these are certain peptides, neuropeptides that are heavily involved in that. And when a mother gives birth to a child, when she breastfeeds, she has these huge spikes in oxytocin, which causes bonding or is related to bonding with the child. So there is definitely a neurochemical component to the experience of love, and that's something that we hope to look at as well. So, and it's not unidirectional. It's like you can generate feelings of love inwardly through your thoughts and through practices that will then mirror the neurochemistry. So it's a two-way street there.
What are those thoughts and practices?
What
could you do?
Right. So there are a lot of different things you can do. One important thing is to sort of disengage the pathological thinking processes first. So you want to get out of your routine thoughts. So this is where like meditation comes in. So meditation is really great for cultivating loving energy and compassion. That's been shown quite a bit in the literature. And there's a saying I love, which is, don't cover your heart with your mind. So I think getting the mind out of the way naturally opens up the heart as well. And practices meditation and also yoga. We see this, I've done studies with kids and yoga, and it's incredible how just these children doing yoga, all of a sudden they'll start talking about how much they love their classmates that they had fights with. They're like, I actually feel like I really love him now. And so it's almost like getting yourself, little self, out of the way to let the bigger self just be. And in that state is love. So a lot of different practices that are based in calming the mind and energizing the heart is how I like to think about it. And I know for myself, practicing Reiki has really, really increased that love. Connecting with animals, that's really important. doing some humanitarian work, anything that opens your heart up, following just your passion and what moves you in life opens your heart up. And also cognitive restructuring. So it's based in cognitive behavioral therapy, or this is where like affirmations come in, just changing the way you think, cultivating more positive, happy thoughts towards others, even if in the beginning it feels disingenuous. It's a practice. So I'm developing a technique, actually, a universal love meditation that I'll be testing as part of my research. And so it'll be a combination of a lot of these things, and breath work too, because life force rides on the breath. So making sure we're breathing properly. And so really cultivating full life force embodiment, quieting the mind and any pathological thoughts there that keep us kind of trapped in the ego mind, and really focusing on the heart too. Just holding your hands on your heart is enough to open it up a little bit. So
Natalie, what exactly are you testing when you say you're going to be testing a universal love meditation?
Right. So we can look at a few different things. So we can look at just what's going on physiologically during that practice. So what's happening in the brain? Are we seeing these increases in this neurochemistry associated with love? Are we seeing an increase in gene expression for positive genes? Are we seeing an increase in immune function? These are things we expect with the practice. So we can test before and after, and what we see changing in the neurochemistry and the function and structure of the brain. And we can also see behaviorally what happens and emotionally what happens to individuals when they do the practice. So this is where we would bring in individuals that are theoretically lower in universal love. So violent criminals, for instance. There's a few friends that work with serial killers and violent criminals that have been incarcerated for 20 to 40 years. And they're actually giving them meditation, and it's transforming the way they see the world and everything. And I believe everybody can be rehabilitated. So we would test doing this practice of universal love meditation over a certain period of time. Do these individuals grow in their level of universal love? And we can look at the scale for that. And we can also look at their physiology and the way that they are with other people, their prison mates, the guards, etc. And also children with autism who have less empathy. They have less cognitive empathy, it's called. So they don't really understand the emotions of others so much. So we found that people higher in universal love are higher in empathy. So if we give this particular type of meditation to children with autism, for instance, do we see increases in empathy as well? So these are some of the options that we can pursue.
Can I just ask for some clarity around that? Because I read about sociopaths and psychopaths sometimes, and psychopaths specifically do not have that. You can, and what I've been reading is that psychopaths specifically cannot be cured because a sociopath is created, psychopath is born that way. And, they say that there's basically no hope for those people. Are you saying that there's the potential to change that, even with such a severe case of lack of brain development in that one department?
Yeah, I do believe that there's potential to change that, especially at a younger age. That's really important too, is identifying these children early on. They usually have what's called oppositional defiant disorder or conduct disorder. So there are early warning signs. And most of these people, if not all of them, have, and I would say all of them have had trauma. So there's some sort of environmental instance that changed them to begin with. So, and the brain, many years ago, we thought the brain couldn't change, and that's absolutely not true anymore. So we can change our structure and function of the brain with regular practice. And I think just knowing some of the friends I work with that do work with sociopaths, that there absolutely does seem to be hope for them. There is a case of a young girl there's a documentary about her actually, and she was she wanted to murder her whole family. It was pretty scary, especially because she was 5 or 6, and they took her out of the family, and this woman took care of her for a few years, and she completely turned her around, and she's no longer a sociopath, but she could have ended up being a serial killer of some kind, which would have been terrible. But in terms of empathy, so sociopaths and autistic people are sort of opposite in their empathy. So there's 3 forms of empathy that have been identified to date. So there's emotional empathy or affective empathy. So that's when you feel the emotions of another person directly. So it's oh, I feel sad. Oh, this person must be sad. There's cognitive empathy. So that's understanding that someone feels a certain way, even though you might not feel it yourself. So you're walking down the street, someone's crying, you're like, oh, they're sad. That's empathy, but you're not feeling it yourself. And then there's motor empathy, where we're just sort of mimicking other people naturally, to like kind of like that's where the mirror neurons come in. Probably is maybe you're watching a movie and someone gets hit or shot and all of a sudden you feel it. That's like, or you twitch. That's like motor empathy. So with sociopaths, they have cognitive empathy, but not emotional empathy. So they understand what makes you tick. They understand what's going to scare you. They understand when you're sad, scared, and in pain, but they don't feel it. Whereas so there's very little motivation when you don't feel what other people are going through to want to help them. And maybe you get a kick out of seeing their different emotions that you don't experience. Whereas with autistic people, they have the emotional empathy and less of the cognitive empathy. So they may be in a situation, if they're around someone who's going through something severe and maybe they're really angry or upset, the autistic person will feel that, but they might not understand why that person is feeling that way. So there are different forms of empathy. So in the sociopath, we'd want to increase their emotional empathy, whereas in the autistic, we would want to increase their cognitive empathy to create that balance. So I do believe that they can be rehabilitated. Of course, the challenge with sociopaths a lot of the times is they don't think anything's wrong with them. So it's like, well, I'm not going to change. There's nothing to change. If they're incarcerated for 40 years and they're sitting there, it's like, okay, fine, I'll take this program. Like if they're in prison, it's a lot easier for them to be able to want to do these interventions. So whereas when they're out in the world, there's a lot of sociopaths and narcissists that are just, kind of hidden, and they're screwing people over in various ways, but they're not, murderers. So
yeah, what you're saying seems to contradict the conventional wisdom that these people are kind of locked into this state. Once they get to adulthood with no empathy, there's nothing that can change them. And there's just no way to, restore that empathy function. But you're saying that's not really true.
Yeah, I don't think that's the case. And I wonder actually if there are any, just based on colleagues that are doing meditation interventions with sociopathic people and seeing them like cry for the first time and hug and meet the people that one went and really wanted to meet the daughter of the person that he killed and ask for forgiveness. So anecdotally, there's transformation happening. I don't know the research, if there's been enough research on that yet. And things like MDMA, for instance, like what would happen if you gave MDMA to a sociopath? I don't know if that's been tested. So maybe there needs to be more drastic means with them. I'm not sure. So, but I strongly believe that it doesn't mean everybody can necessarily change or want to, but I do believe in general that there's the capability of that, especially the way the brain can compensate and grow new neurons and redistribute function. So I don't think any brain is damaged permanently.
I have a question about MDMA, Natalie, since you brought it up. How do you get permission to study a drug that is classified as not legal in most jurisdictions?
Yeah, you have to go through a very strict, long process of ethics board approval. So any research that you do has to go through an ethics board, usually through a university. And when it involves a drug, then it has to go through extra regulations, including FDA approval or whoever the governing body is for that. So I think MAPS, Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, led by Rick Doblin, has done an incredible job of convincing the FDA and the DEA to, allow this type of research. So, and he's been working on that for decades. So It's a really long process, but he's made him and his team has made such incredible progress in that area that it's opening up now therapeutic research with psilocybin mushrooms as well, and hopefully other.
Yeah, and are you interested in psychedelics too? Like I've heard things about psilocybin basically curing cluster headaches and things like that, and other things about psychedelics. Do you get into that at all, or is that not your area?
It is sort of my area. Well, I'm writing a book on it right now, so I guess that would make it my area.
Wow.
I've done research with salvia, actually. So I am very interested in psychedelics because of its ability to totally shift our way of viewing reality, and usually for the better. That's at least what the research seems to show. So I think it has really good potential for people that they can't get out of a certain mode of thinking or a certain mode of viewing the world and need sort of a shakeup, or they're so far gone in their wounds that they need a deep, intense healing, which I would recommend having a guide or a shaman or a therapist with you for that, which is part of the...
How do you find a therapist or a shaman, though?
Well, for MDMA, for the MDMA work with MAPS, you can go to their website, and I think they have a list of, you can be a part of a study and you can find one of their therapists. So,
okay, awesome. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, it's happening more and more. So there are training programs to be a therapist as well. So, and I think there's probably quite a wait list for that kind of work right now. And then when it comes to the shaman, there are tons of it's very trendy to go and have an ayahuasca retreat. And of course, you want to find a legitimate guide, not someone who's just set up a hut in Peru to make money off of Westerners. There's a lot of that going on too. So ideally, you want to do a lot of research before that. Yeah.
When I actually have a question about ayahuasca. So when somebody has ayahuasca, a lot of times I've vaguely considered doing it, but then I hear about people just puking and stuff, and that just sounds terrible, like tripping and throwing up and being faced with your ugly inner self. I mean, that sounds terrible. Do you have any comments about that? Because I think that would probably make people not want to do it because they're afraid.
Yeah, no. For me, I haven't done ayahuasca myself either, and that does sound, it's very off-putting. It's like, and you'll just throw up for like 10 hours with some strangers.
Especially amongst a bunch of other people. Like, okay, I'm okay with puking on my own, maybe, but not with like a bunch of other people around.
Yeah, and that's part of the purge, I guess. And I've heard that in the vomit, you can see what you've purged. So some people will see like demons or like snakes or like whatever the shadow represents to you, I guess. So the idea with psychedelics, or the way that, shamanically that they're used, is to bring the unconscious to the conscious. So we can be flooded with all these like shadow aspects of ourselves. All of our wounds come to the surface so that we can face them and transmute them. And so we have, every time we have a trauma or get hurt in some way, this is part of aspects of shamanism, a part of our essence, this life force, splinters off and goes into the unconscious. And once it's there, it starts to control us in ways that we are oblivious to. So it's like, why do we still have these behavioral patterns in certain relationships? Or why can't I just like fix this thing about myself? And this is where those shadow elements come in. And so psychedelics and shamanism purge out those shadow aspects and put them right in front of the light of your consciousness and your conscious mind, so that you can face them and transmute them and bring them, the metaphor, like bring them into the light so that you can be an integrated self.
So can we, are there other ways to do this though? Because I always hear people talking about ayahuasca and psychedelics as if they're a miracle drug. Oh, it's like 10 years of therapy in one experience. Mm-hmm. And when I hear stuff like that, I feel really skeptical, and it makes me think like, well, I know a lot of people who have done psychedelics, and it doesn't seem like they've healed all their trauma, right?
Yeah.
So tell me about that. Like, what is the hype all about? And is it, in your opinion, is the hype warranted? Are there other ways to achieve enlightenment and healing besides taking psychedelics? Like, can the same thing access meditation? Or tell me more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the hype, and there's huge hype around psychedelics right now, is the issue of this culture. We're sort of in like a dying culture, and we're looking for a new way of being. And the reason that psychedelics appeal so much too in this culture is that it's like a pill, or, it's a drug that you can take really quickly and have a fast transformation. So,
right.
Like Silicon Valley's taken this and run with it. It's like, how can I be more productive? How can I be more innovative using this drug? So it's just like, for some people, it's a new drug, and they're not really using it for healing. They're using it to get some kind of edge or something like that. But absolutely meditation, yoga even, like I've been in a yoga class where I've full on had like what would be considered a psychedelic experience, and just key aspects of it, like emerging with all that is, like seeing, certain colors and lights and these sorts of things. So I think it's like our culture is very much like, give me something quick that's going to change me so that I don't have to do the work. But a key part of true entheogenic or psychedelic healing is the work after. So you really should just have like one experience, and that should last you for like quite a while you integrate. So integration, super key. So starting to take the time to really internalize the experience and try to understand and make changes based on what was revealed to you, rather than just going out and having another session. And then feeling like a high for like a few weeks after. So, and
I love what you said about that. People are trying to get an edge. I mean, that's so funny. It seems to me like so against the point,
Yep.
It's not a competition. It's about self-improvement. And the only one you're competing with, if you even want to call it that, is yourself. You're trying to improve on yourself.
Exactly.
So what about dreams? Like, what about dream analysis? Because this is something I've started doing, and I found it tremendously valuable. And dreams can be really kind of trippy. You can get a lot of really good information about them if you pay attention to them, and if you write them down. And sometimes there's lucid dreams that just happen, or you can train for that. So tell us about anything about dreams.
Yeah, that's another example of the unconscious aspects being brought to conscious awareness. If we're aware and we're journaling and we're taking the time to think about them and think about the symbology and all of that. Yeah. So it's absolutely another way to explore the subconscious, bring it to light, and do some healing work on that. So yeah. And psychotherapy. I mean, there's so many different ways of trying to get at those so-called shadow aspects of ourselves that may be controlling us in ways that, we're done with. We want to live in a new way. And so what's holding me back? And to look at some of these themes and certain dreams that keep repeating, and then really looking into that. And doing dream analysis. I know this old psychoanalysis, Freud and Jung were very much into that. And so there's a lot of literature on dream analysis as well. So huge benefits there as well, for sure. I don't think there's been a lot of research in that area, actually, especially lucid dreams. There hasn't been much research at all. So it's probably a very difficult thing to study. I know that they've been able to elicit lucid dreaming through changing signaling in the brain a little bit. So that's kind of interesting.
Well, Natalie, I have a question for you. My mom specifically, she teaches kids on the autism spectrum, and they've used yoga in their classes. They've used horse therapy, just being around horses, touching horses, cats. Mm-hmm. There's all these kind of soothing kind of therapies that have worked brilliantly with kids that they never thought would talk. I mean, it's really, really incredible. And I do think of my mom specifically as somebody who's just like bursting with empathy and love. So I know her feeling and the therapy and all that is really, really useful. And these kids are really young. They're like 3 to 5. I'm wondering if there's something that parents of kids who maybe aren't on the autism spectrum, but are more on that, they're worried that maybe they're on that sociopathic spectrum, or their kids aren't feeling empathy. Is there something that they can do specifically for their kids? Because I know she's had a lot of kids with oppositional defiance disorder in her classes, and they're terrifying in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And is there some kind of alternate therapy? How do you kind of split that therapy between those two different groups of people, the people that maybe don't feel the way that their brain kind of should feel in that sense of love? Is that something that can be worked on as an adult? I mean, what do you think about that?
So the two groups, meaning someone with oppositional defiant disorder and someone with autism, is that?
Yeah, I mean, with the autism, I know that there's a lot of the soothing therapies, and there are a lot of things that I've heard that have worked really, really well. But I'm wondering about maybe a parent or a sibling or a friend or somebody who maybe worries that their child or their friend or their significant other might have those sociopathic tendencies. Is there something that they can do on their end to help that kid? Is there?
Yeah, well, certainly taking them to a licensed professional would be a really important step. Hopefully, someone who is more open to mind-body practices and doesn't just have an old materialist view of the brain, or, try to just give them a drug or something like that. But a key practice is cultivating self-regulation. So a lot of the times it's like there's no space between the child's thoughts, emotions, and their behavior. So teaching them how to, breath work, this is where yoga and mindfulness certainly helps kids, like so much, to create space between themselves, their point of awareness, and their thoughts, so that they don't identify with them and they don't feel like every time, they're angry or upset that's them, and they take that on as themselves. And that causes a lot of suffering. So a lot of practices that help to improve self-regulation, and that can be physiological and mental. So it's like top down and bottom up. So yoga is really good for that, actually, because it's retraining the body as well, and how the body responds to threat and stress.
And what about yoga? I mean, in terms of yoga, I've always been interested. I've tried a few different kinds. I know there's so many different types of yoga. Is there a specific type of yoga that you feel like helps more with universal love and connecting with other people?
Well, that's a pretty good question. Yeah, there are so many different kinds. And myself, like, I practice a lot of different kinds, just depending on what I feel like. I would say less of the more vigorous, like hot power yoga, because that a lot of times can just put you into like workout mode or competitive mode, and doesn't really help with keeping you connected to the mind and the fluctuations of the mind. So yoga is like going beyond the fluctuations of the mind. So finding that still point within. So any practice that helps with that. So there's yin yoga, for instance, can be really challenging. And that's really, you're just working with gravity. So you'd be in a forward fold for maybe 5 minutes, just breathing. And that's when you can really notice the mind starting to come up. So if the teacher says like, okay, 15 more breaths, and you're like, oh, and all of a sudden you're like projecting, you're angry, and it's like, whoa, that's just like a thought. But she could just as easily say 2 more breaths, and you'll be like, okay, good. Phew. But you're still in that same moment. So it kind of like amplifies where your thoughts are causing you suffering. So a practice that incorporates a lot of breath work is also really important. Breath serves as that anchor. And you'll notice like anytime you're in a posture and it starts to get challenging, or you're, suffering a bit, it's like, oh, check the breath, because it's usually constricted, and that's our life force, right? So we're like blocking our own essence. So learning to like regulate the breath helps us regulate our emotions and our thoughts. And that's really valuable for children, because we're not taught that in school, and parents are too busy to teach that to our kids anymore. And so having kids yoga class, really, really, really helpful. I've seen it transform kids with oppositional defiant disorder. It helps them feel connected to their classmates and cultivate love. So really, really good practice. And not everybody wants to do yoga, but mindfulness is such a natural state of being. It's when we're fully present and really taking in life and enjoying life. And this is a natural state to be mindful. Babies are quite mindful. They're looking around, looking at new things, taking in the world. And so this yoga is a way of cultivating mindfulness, but mindfulness can be cultivated moment to moment. So that's really, really key for developing self-regulation, and for the children to not get lost in the fluctuations of their mind, which are not them. They're just, the mind is a tool for experiencing this reality. And so having those kids get some space between that, and to start to identify with their true self, the witness inside of their experience, rather than identifying as anger or sadness or rage and all of these sorts of things that will always fluctuate.
Is there a difference between romantic love and what about making love? I mean, how does that affect the whole spectrum? Because, you have familial love, you have friend love. Is there a difference from a chemical perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So with romantic love, you have a lot of the hormones involved, so sex hormones. So testosterone and estrogen are very much involved. It's highly involves the dopaminergic system. So dopamine is very rewarding neurochemical, and we can almost become like addicted to the other, like I need that fix. I need, to hear from them or whatever. So this is really involving the reward system, and all forms of love we think involve this reward system. It's a pleasurable state, feels good, but romantic love seems to have more of that like addictive component, and those parts of the brain that are involved in addiction are more involved in romantic love. In terms of making love, this is where we get a lot of oxytocin and the neurochemistry that bonds us to another. So this is really important for survival. You want to be bonded to your partner to make children, to raise those children together, especially with humans where it takes many, many years for a child to be mature enough to survive on their own. So you want to be really bonded to your partner. So there's a lot of oxytocin involved in vasopressin as well. Interestingly, oxytocin for men can sometimes cause aggression. So it's almost like creates a bond within the family and you want to defend that family. So it could be aggressive to like outsiders, protect your family sort of thing. With maternal love, you see a lot of the bonding neurochemistry as well, less of the like addictive neurochemistry, but certainly rewarding, and some areas of the brain, deep in the brain, that are active that are not active with romantic love. So there definitely are differences there. And our theory is that universal love will look a lot more like maternal love than romantic love, but there will definitely be overlap. So the unconditional aspect of maternal love will definitely play more of a role with universal love as well. So yeah, I see it like love as this pure force, this binding force, and it gets projected onto different people or the self even, or animals, all of existence. All of it will look a little bit different, but also have a lot of overlap. So,
wow. I wanted to go back to one thing when we were talking about sociopaths and psychopaths and stuff. There's also something a little bit more low grade. Say you have a narcissist in your life and you don't want to cut them out, but you don't know how to get them to stop being so horrible and so self-centered. This sounds kind of bad, but I don't care. Can you trick them into practicing these empathy exercises? Because, for example, a narcissist doesn't really think that they need to change. Can you get them to somehow, without having to tell them, hey, I think you're a narcissist, why don't you try meditation?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I first thought you were going to say, can you like drug them? You slip some MDMA in their drink or something. No, like that's a tough one. I mean, narcissists are really difficult to deal with, and especially if you're an empath, and the tendency is to want to fix them and help them. And that's how they, get hooked onto you and kind of drain you in that way. But I think like we all mirror each other. So the more that if you're in a relationship with a narcissist, the more that you can stay calm and connected to your true self, the more that they will have to, or you will just won't stay together. But I don't know how you can make anyone do anything. I mean, I guess you could take them to meditation and hopefully, or different practices, and their heart can open and they can have different sessions. But sometimes, like I was in a relationship with a narcissist and it was so difficult. Like I've definitely done wanting to change anyone in that way. So, but what I did find, is that in my research is that people higher in universal love are lower in narcissism. So possibly if they do these techniques that can increase universal love, we should see a decrease in narcissism. So that's something that we can test for sure. And then, you could be like, here, come to do this meditation with me, like 3 days a week for 4 weeks. Like, see what happens.
I have a question, Natalie. You're talking about, narcissism, sociopathy, oppositional defiant disorder. To me, these labels kind of decrease the connection, the sense of connectedness that I feel when I use them. Like when I'm calling someone else a sociopath or a narcissist, it's almost like labeling them, okay, you're other, you're different, or a kid that has oppositional defiant disorder. To me, it sounds uncompassionate is what I'm saying, but these are kind of like technical jargon that you kind of have to use if you're publishing research in the scientific field. And so how do you square that away? And do you even believe like labels like oppositional defiant disorder are useful, or sociopathy? Are those useful labels?
I think, in the scientific world, they're definitely useful. If we don't create a label or categorize, then we can't address and we can't fix, and we can't treat like legally. So if we want to treat someone for something, we have to be able to diagnose them. That's the current system. So in that sense, it really helps. But things like schizophrenia and depression, like I certainly personally view them more of an energetic level. I look at the trauma. The label doesn't define the person the way I see it, but the way that we need to do the work to change the way we see them to begin with is by labeling. Unfortunately, you can't really publish, like it would be really difficult we could categorize just people low in empathy. We don't have to take people that are diagnosed sociopath or whatever. We can just, recruit from a huge pool and find all the people that are low in empathy and then, recruit them specifically and then just call them people that happen to score low in empathy. So yeah, the labels absolutely can damage. So I used to do patient testing, neuropsychology work. So I'd have kids and adults come in and I'd diagnose them. So I'd give them a bunch of tests and that was, it was tough because I know the power of the label. Once you give them a label, then it just programs them essentially into being that way.
It becomes a self-fulfilling thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, totally. I was like that with depression. I called myself a depressed person. I am clinically depressed. And that was, a cognitive program that I told myself that kept the depression going. And it wasn't until I started these practices that I disengaged from that and was like, holy, I've been like maintaining this. I've been reinforcing this. Just through my own labels and beliefs that are not even true. And that's where mindfulness comes in too. You notice, I worked in Ellen Langer's lab at Harvard and the way that she defines mindfulness is noticing new things and noticing variability. So if you're depressed or have depression, diagnosed, you're not always depressed. Some days you're having a great time. Maybe, you have a really good day and you're happy. And so noticing that variability, it's like, wow, I'm not this blanket term, today I'm happy. Like, so I'm not always depressed. And once you start to tune into those variabilities, the differences, then you can start to cultivate them more too and disengage from a faulty way of viewing yourself, really. So I have to straddle those worlds for my research. I need to create these categories. It's the same with like measuring universal love. It's like part of me is like, ugh, like you can't measure love, or you can't it's a self-report questionnaire, but it's necessary so that we can study it, so that we can start to change society and systems and educate people. So it's kind of like a necessary that we have to sometimes do, and hopefully eventually we don't have to anymore. But
a necessary
Yeah,
like that. I'm going to start using that.
Well, guys, can I just make a quick comment that's a little contradictory? I have OCD, and I didn't know what I had until I was about 19. And I just happened to read, and I got it pretty late in life. I would say maybe around like 17 is when it started really showing itself. And I read an article in a magazine. Nobody was talking about this back then. No one really talked about OCD at all. And when I read that article explaining what it was, even though it said, okay, you have obsessive compulsive disorder, for me, it was like a massive revelation. I was kind of on the other side of the spectrum of somebody telling me like, oh, wow, okay, this is what it is. Like, you're not crazy. This is a real disorder. People have this. There are ways that you can work around it. And I mean, I did a lot of cognitive therapy on my own without a therapist. And I remember the first time I saw a therapist, she was like, this is phenomenal. You're more advanced and in control of your OCD than most people I've seen who've been in therapy for 20 years. And I don't know if I hadn't read that article when I was so young that I would have been able to really process what it was that I had and learn from it. So just a little bit of a opposition to the label. For me, that was enormously helpful. It was huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the key there is shifting from, okay, now, you know what's going on, and now shift from like being a victim of that to fixing it. And that sounds like that's exactly what you did.
Exactly. It was like a revelation. It completely changed my life, that one article.
Mm-hmm. No, I absolutely. Labels can be so important. And the key is not being owned by that label and then doing something about it, for sure. Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add that in.
No, really good, really good point.
This is a really cool show. Do you gals have any other questions?
I have tons of other questions.
I know,
I think if we don't have time to address all of them.
Okay. What are the final like takeaways from this, Natalie? Like what are some action items if our listeners are listening and thinking, I want some more love in my life? What can they do concretely, like some action items?
Yeah, well, I guess like I've been talking a lot about the practices. So if you want
yoga.
Yeah, I'm always going to be in favor of those. And like I said, the mind covers the heart. So the more that we can become a master of our own minds, the more that our heart will naturally start to open as well. So really gaining control of our thoughts and our own personal programming and taking self-responsibility and cultivating love for the self, which is very much connected to universal love. It's just the state of being in love will naturally happen as we commit to these practices. So it takes time though, you have to be committed and create sort of a pattern in your life where you're going to, prioritize meditation, prioritize how you feel basically. And cognitive therapy, affirmations, these sorts of things really work. So finding whatever you like, maybe not everybody wants to meditate, but yoga's okay because they like to move their body. These will naturally start to cultivate love, and you'll start to attract people into your life that are also more aligned with that too. And being in that state, you will recognize more if you're like around a narcissist who's going to start to drain your energy and not show you the love that, that you deserve because you are that. So quite a few different practices, and psychedelics can help too. It's not something that you should do regularly, but it can really help shift your perspective in a dramatic way so that you can potentially open your heart. And research shows that it's really, really good for depression, actually. So treatment-resistant depression, which is very much a lack of love and a lack of life force, can drastically be improved by psilocybin mushrooms, for instance. So there are a lot of tools available, going to an energy healer, going to someone who really understands the connection between mind and body to being healthy. There's like so many ways that you can cultivate love, and hopefully I'll have a universal love meditation out within a few months. And
yeah, I'd love to hear that. Where can people catch up with you?
You can go to my website, drnatalietrent.com. I'm also on Facebook, Natalie Lee, which is my middle name, Trent, and Instagram too. So you can find me any of those three places and send me a message. I'm happy to chat with whoever.
Awesome, Natalie. Thank you so much for being on the show. Great.
Thank you. It's been really, really fun, and there's so much more that we can talk about. I know that. So, but
maybe when you have some more of your workout, we'd love to have you back on the show. I think that'd be great. And if the audience has any comments or questions, please feel free to leave them. The website where you can listen to this show and all the other Proof of Loves is proofoflovecast.com. If you're listening and you like this show, please share it with some friends. And also feel free to leave us a review on iTunes. There's also thetatianashow.com if you want some other shows on crypto and politics and all things around the world. So thank you once again for joining us, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Show me your heart. I know that it's beating. Tell me that you love me too. So I know your heart is true. 'Cause I need some proof of love. 'Cause I need some proof of love. 'Cause I need some proof of love. Do you like cryptocurrency, politics, economics, activism, or art? Then check out The Tatiana Show, where you can learn all about it in a fun and non-intimidating way, as if you're just hanging with friends. Go to thetatianashow.com and listen now.
Ross Ulbricht is serving a double life sentence without parole for all nonviolent charges for creating a website. Please help free this peaceful man. Go to freeross.org and sign and share the petition.
Thank you for listening to Proof of Love. Please follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Proof of Lovecast. More episodes can be found at proofoflovecast.com. And make sure you leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends. Proof of Love has been brought to you by CryptoMediaHub.com, a boutique marketing and PR agency for Bitcoin and beyond.